Hi, everybody. Welcome to Real Ideas, a series of industry and film conversations from the Toronto Real International Film Festival. My name is Samir. I'm the festival's industry and education programmer. Today's artist talk is titled CREATURA, a journey into the unfamiliar. CREATURA is a multimedia cross-programming stream at the 28th Real International Film Festival, spotlighting the strange, the wild, and the untamed, concepts historically used to marginalize. This session will explore how these concepts manifest through stories of endangered traditions and reimagined realities. We will discuss the documentary The Last of the Sea Woman, which highlights South Korean fisherwomen preserving an ancient practice amid modern change, and the feature film Universal Language, set in a reimagined Canada where Farsi and French are official languages, presenting a surreal world where societal norms are disrupted and loneliness prevails. Both films challenge conventional perspectives and push the boundaries of human experience. Before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone who has made this festival possible, including our staff, our committees, our board, and our many volunteers. Relations offices and main activities are located on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat nations. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a treaty of collective responsibility for the protection and sharing of land, water, and resources. As storytellers and advocates for the arts and expression, we at Real Asian reckon openly with our responsibility to this land and its caretakers. We recognize that we are still in a time of great upheaval and need, that the dispossession of Indigenous communities and loss of their language and culture is not a thing of the past, but it is still ongoing. Real Asian is a community-based charity that relies on individuals like yourselves and your donations to continue our year-round programming. This includes film screenings, panel discussions like this one, and networking events. If you're inclined, please feel free to donate at realasian.com/donate. We'd also like to thank our Real Idea sponsors. This includes Warner Bros. Discovery Access Canada, IATSE 873, Ontario Creates for their support of our Real Ideas program. Lastly, we're always eager to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear what you think of our events, what you'd like to see in the future. So we're going to be posting a link to our survey. Please feel free to answer the survey, and you have a chance to win a prize package if you answer and fill out the survey. I'm now going to introduce today's incredible moderator, Saffron, to welcome our speakers and get this conversation started. Saffron is a Toronto-based critic and curator. Her writing has appeared in Film Comment, The Globe and Mail, Sight and Sound, Movie Notebook, Reverse Shot, CinemaScope, Hyperallergic, Toronto Star, and The Screen Slate. Make sure to check out some of her writing. She is a curator of Contours at Paradise, a monthly series of films which thematize visual art. Saffron is an active member of the Toronto Film Critics Association and Gallica, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics, as well as a past guest speaker and moderator for TIFF, as well as International Film Festival of Ottawa, Dave Barber Cinematheque, Wavelengths, and Mark S. Bonham Center for Sexual Diversity Studies. Hi, Saffron. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you kindly for the introduction, Samir. I'm very excited to be moderating this panel with two distinguished guests today, Iris Ng and Isla Firouzabadi. Iris is a cinematographer known for work that focuses on human rights, marginalized perspectives, and POV filmmaking. She has extensive experience in documentary films, but has also been lensing films for contemporary artists, as well as shot scripted shorts, primetime TV, and digital series. Her most notable work includes Stories We Tell, Shirkers, and celebrated socially critical feature documentaries, such as Twice Colonized, One of Ours, Subjects of Desire, A Better Man, Migrant Dreams, and most recently, Exclusion, Beyond the Silence, and The Last of the Sea Women. Isla is an interdisciplinary artist who focuses on ambiguous and sensitive forms through drawings and a combination sculpture and installation. She received a BA in graphic design in 2005 from Azad University of Art and Architecture in Tehran and graduated from École nationale des arts décoratifs de Strasbourg in 2009. Recently, Isla's practice has expanded into moving images in 2 collaborative projects with director Matthew Rankin, an Esperanto language docufiction project presently in production, Congreso, and the fictional film Universal Language, which premiered at the 55th Directors Fortnight in Cannes. Very pleased to be chatting about these 2 films, The Last of the Sea Women and Universal Language, because I find them incredibly endearing in their approaches to culture, community, and presentation and preservation. So to begin, I'm especially interested in the fact that both of you occupy different positions as film workers right now, but both have backgrounds in visual art. Before we get into the specific projects that you're here to chat about, would you mind briefly sharing how you came to your respective positions of screenwriter and cinematographer? Iris, did you want to start?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for Relation for this discussion, and Saffron for moderating. I went to a public art school in Toronto, where I specialized in music and visual art, and then in high school photography before I went to film school in university. And what I learned there, which was very formative, was the interrogation of the form, which has very much shaped the way I approach my practice now in different ways. It taught me how to be observant and to listen, and also to be accountable to my creative choices. So I remember always being asked, why did you choose this? Why blue? Why these lines? And it's just trained me to always have a reason for everything that I choose, especially in such a technical realm of cinematography. There's a lot of developments over time that are very tempting to want to use. And over the years, I've just tended to be more careful about using them, always questioning why we would ever use them, and to always step back and to ask those questions. So it was very formative for me in that way.
Isla, do you mind sharing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Saffron. Yes, I study sculpture and installation, and still I'm doing it. This is really my second collaboration on the movies with Matthew Rankin, the director of Universal Language. I really appreciated to collaborate on this movie, even that my background is visual art, but I got some connection with this movie because it's, as you saw, it's a lot of elements like water happening in the movie, like teardrops, like melting water, like ice. And it's a couple of years that I'm making fountains with water. So when me and Matthew started to talk about it, we realized that kind of it related to the practice I'm doing, such as circulating the water as an object, circulation and recycle. And in this movie, the fluidity of the people going around. So it was kind of connection that really interested me to collaborate on this movie with Matthew.
I like hearing about that connection because the fluidity is very much there, but also there's that scene in the film in the Winnipeg Mall where the fountain won't turn on, and they say this is a fountain that used to once work. That's lovely. Iris, I wanted to ask, kind of in keeping with like visuals and visual language, The Last of the Sea Women observes the culture of the Haino, who are female divers from Jeju Island who harvest sea life using just their breath. I wanted to first ask when you came to discover this practice, was it related to this project, and what your first impression of it was?
Yeah, I had no knowledge of the Haenyeo before director Soo Kim approached me on Zoom to tell me about this project, and she described basically what you see in the film, which was that there are these elderly women on Jeju Island on the coast that have been practicing the centuries-old practice, performing impressive, incredible feats with their own breath, on top of the fact that they are elderly. And I suppose there's a lot that that we did to prepare for the shoot, in location scouting and getting the lay of the situation, where we would visit the communal centers before the Henyo arrived there. Looked at the shorelines, looked at the shelling areas where the cleaning is done, and seeing their orange floats and their wetsuits. But until those objects were activated by the actual women, nothing could really paint a picture of what would actually unfold, which was watching a 90-year-old, for instance, put on a wetsuit, walk out onto the rocky shore, which quickly, by the way, and it was very hard to keep up with her, and just launch off into the water for a couple hours and come back with a bag of seafood and helping others as well. That was my first, I mean, my first impression was sort of an incredible one, and one of awe, because nothing was nobody could describe to me what I was about to see. And I feel like the film, it can just be built on that action. So yeah, I learned, it was very much a learning process for me, and of discovery, which is one of the more exciting parts of what I get to do.
And I was so also touched by that fact watching the film, that the majority of the Hanyo are kind of from their 60s to their 90s, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really born into that community and brought up into that profession. What was your experience kind of entering into that space? That kind of space that's been cultivated for so much time. Like, how did you feel as an artist entering that space?
Yeah, I mean, there was an amazing production with us, Compass Productions on the ground, who did a lot of research and found a lot of the participants in the film. So a lot came from them and what they had researched. And so we stepped in with the knowledge that they had gathered, and with the relationships that they had built themselves. But a lot of that is also in the moment through consultation. So a lot of filming that I've done over the years is quite spontaneous. And I'd say that this project was a little bit less so, because there's that language barrier. I was one of the few non-Koreans on this project, mostly female-led, mostly Korean on the ground, our camera team, as well as my co-cinematographer, Eun-Soo Cho, who is local to Seoul, Korea. We very much had to ask permission a lot of the time before we pointed a camera at anybody. So it was a little bit more careful, a little bit slower than I'm used to or would have liked. But that respectful process was something I was happy to be, undertaking. I'd also just say that exceptionalism that they exhibit in what they do was interesting, because it was an accepted norm. I think stepping into that is quite remarkable. And the Henyo in Jeju Island are both these women who are very, very down to earth. Like, I've never met a group of people who are more sort of unself-conscious, and people, they say they're scrappy, and there's scenes in the film where they're arguing, and it's pretty fun to watch. But at the same time, they are put on a pedestal in terms of like a novelty. Like, they are the symbols of Jeju. There are murals of them. There are souvenirs in their shape, but it's not in a way that it's exoticized. It's this pride that the Korean community has for them as well. So seeing it from that perspective from both of those perspectives was really interesting.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask Isla, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Universal Language, it's your first screenwriting credit and your first writing credit. And the film's been received very well critically. And it's also Canada's submission to the Academy Awards. Did you have any sort of inkling at any point, or any idea that the film would kind of take off in the way that it has? Because premise-wise, it feels like something that's like, it's incredibly surreal.
Yeah, this is my first writing experience for sure. And it's collaboration with our other co-writer, Piruz Nemati, and of course Matthew Rankin. So at the beginning, this yeah, we just, all these things happen like conversation wise, you know, and as I'm always saying this, we're very close friends, and the seed of this movie grew from friendship. So when we were trying to write about it, the script, the dialogues, everything, it was kind of like our lifestyle involved. You know, it was Matthew biography. It was something that I had in my life. Pius had in his life. All the other actors, which they most of them they're non-actors, and they are really our good friends. So as I'm saying all the time, we cast them like in our parties in a way, you know. So I mean, the seed just grew up like that, and when we were working, we were really doing very joyfully this movie, and we really didn't think about what's gonna happen later. As you said, it's a very abstract and surreal movie, and I think exactly is kind of like a projection of our life, how we are living now in this world. You know, it's very abstract in a way, let's say, and for me, it's very surreal. Maybe in my visual art, you can see a little bit too. But in a way, we were talking. This is for us is kind of, I don't know if this is a good word to say, but insanity that we're doing with a joyful aspect of it. But let's do it, and let's not think about what's gonna happen. You know, we didn't think about all the festivals coming up or whatever. We just said we're gonna make this art piece. You know, that's why we thought about it.
And beyond writing, you also took on the role of coaching children on set and helping them perfect their Farsi for the film. And I feel like this just conjures such a sweet image in my mind that's so in keeping with what you just said. But could you tell us a little bit about this coaching and your kind of presence on set as well?
Yeah, sure. As you say, it was really, really sweet working with the children. We auditioned the children in a Farsi school in Montreal, and they were so amazing, so thoughtful children, and in a way, even we changed the script because of children. You know, the two main characters, which are the two girls, on the script was one sister and one brother. But when we met them and we were casting them and we saw their characters and their presence and how lovely they were, we said, no, we're just gonna switch to two sisters. And yes, I was with them because they most of them they born or came to Montreal when they were really child, and some of them their Farsi speaking is weaker than the others. So I was really practicing, even in duo practicing Farsi with them. But as I told you, they were so thoughtful, very smart, and they got it very fast. And yeah, for me was learning too, and it was a very very beautiful experience working with the children in Farsi. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to kind of talk, just because both of these films, even though, I like your position as a writer, these are incredibly visual films. And I just feel like they're so striking. There's so many images from them that I just immediately associate. Iris, I wanted to ask, as a cinematographer, how did you find developing the visual language of The Last of the Sea Women relative maybe to your earlier projects?
I didn't find it all that different. There was one differentiating factor, which was that I had a co-cinematographer on this one. So normally the subject matter and the approach is understood by me through a lot of conversations with the director, just hashing out what the core of the story is, what we're actually trying to get to, and what the discoveries are and what the parameters are for that, and then to go out and to actually experience that informs a completely different way of working a lot of the time. So still being open to discovery, but I suppose having a co-cinematographer meant that those discoveries just had to be done in tandem. So I'm checking in with a triangle of people. We're a triangle of people now in terms of this collaboration, and it's liberating in a way that the responsibility can be split amongst you, and we could be a little bit more creative in terms of, I normally don't, for verite, I normally don't go with prime lenses myself. I know a lot of cinematographers do, but for this, we decided to go for something a little bit more cinematic because we had the freedom to do so, and there were two of us, so we went with size primes, because we always knew that one or the other of us would be on a tighter or looser lens, or that, you know, before we went into a situation, we would agree on how we were going to approach a particular situation, whether that happened in real life or not. At least we started there and we had that sort of huddle beforehand. So yeah, it was quite straightforward in terms of the storytelling. So not too different in that way, but just with that added dynamic of this other person.
I'm curious also, Shirkers, which you also shot, it's one of my all-time favorite docs, and it contains quite a bit of archival footage. And The Last of the Sea Women also handles archival and kind of social media footage in these different forms. How involved were you in the handling of these images? And is the material that you shoot ever informed by past footage at your disposal?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Shirkers was a lot of fun to work on, and I like it too. I think in a lot of films that I work on where archive is central, I am very much using it as a jumping off point, and Shirkers is definitely the one film that doesn't exist without that original film, right? So everything that we're doing is adding to that initial story and initial tone with a contemporary lens, a more mature lens, because the protagonists were teenagers at the time, and we're looking at this 20 years later from a more mature angle. And so technologically, how do we set the visuals apart from that and still have a conversation with this material? So a lot of the time I am studying, and in Stories We Tell too, let's say I'm studying the archive and trying to channel something from it, if not emulating it. But in this film, I suppose there wasn't as much of a direct extrapolation or a deduction from the original material. I wasn't looking at any particularly, but really we were sort of doing the opposite, I would say, which is having the idea of a Henyo heyday in mind, because their numbers are dwindling, and there was a time when there were tens of thousands of them on the island, and now it's down to a few thousand. So bearing that in mind, but also the film is more set in the present, where we are just really trying to capture who they are today, where they are today, and the archive is more of a complement to that, and which in a much more brief way, I would say, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And that's very interesting. And I think that has really been at the front of my mind, especially in the story as a story of preservation and the way that the images are kind of in real time archiving the present, and what that actually means when a practice is kind of going out of favor. Isla, I wanted to ask you, in your position as a screenwriter, you're also responsible for world building to that sort of degree. And universal language has one of those incredibly distinct atmospheres. How did that come into being in the writing process? Did you know early kind of what you wanted the film to look and feel like on paper and in practice?
Yeah, let's say we kind of knew it, because as I said, that was a really collaboration between three of us, and it wasn't like a very solitude sitting and writing script. It really came all from the conversations. For example, I knew if this joke I said to Matthew or Pius, they're gonna like it, because I know them as my friends, and vice versa. So most of the dialogues, most of the parts came like that. And even I have to add here that we were really open to other collaborators from other departments, and even our actors, to have their ideas, which happened to us. For example, one scene, if you remember, the turkey wrangler comes singing in the movie, and for the turkeys, and that scene we didn't even write about it. He came on the set, and after we finished with him, he said, "I want to sing for you," and we said, "Oh, okay." And just we turned the light a little bit off, and he started to sing that very beautiful Iranian traditional song, in Farsi, and we were just so amazed. But we didn't know if we're gonna use it later. So with she, our editor, with Sasha, our sound designer, we talked about it, and finally, now that we see the movie, we really can't imagine the movie without that scene and without his singing. So I want to say everything was really involved in the process of writing, kind of like an improvisation sometimes too. And yeah, I think me, myself, Matthew, and Pius, we were all open to the new ideas and the creative minds and brains.
I like that kind of collaborative process, especially across departments, because it feels very rare, but then you get those kind of moments. I'm also curious about the influences going into the project, like the influences on your writing. Were there films or artists who really shaped the story for you? I think obviously watching it, like Kiarostami really sticks out, but I wonder if there were, how much that actually applied to the writing process.
Yeah, that's true. Kiarostami was really kind of like an influence. For example, that zigzag apartment, like in our movie, was really reference to where is the friend's house of Kiarostami, or close up from Kiarostami. But for sure, the white balloon of Jafar Panahi. But in a way, it's for me, when Matthew talked about his idea that it was a real thing happened in his life, it was his grandmother, which when she was a child with her brother, they found money in frozen Winnipeg. So he knew this story like 30 years ago, and later he saw White Balloon of Panahi. So it was kind of like a intersection between the two ideas, one in other part of the world in Tehran and one in Winnipeg. So I mean, those merged all these things together, and let's say have some melancholic Quebecois ideas, some Winnipeg, like for sure, Guy Madden, experimental, and weirdness inside it. So I think it was really kind of like a métissage and a mixture of all these three places, Winnipeg, Montreal, and Tehran together.
And I wonder, because the three of you really are friends, did you have experiences of like sitting down and watching any of those films together, kind of as source material in a way?
Yeah, we did that. We did that too. And it's funny, all the time I'm saying it's very joyful. And always we're saying this is like a never-ending project, a never-ending conversation. Even now the movie is finished, everything's done, we went to the festivals, still we're talking about ideas. I said, oh, if we go back to that person, the cake seller persona, and think about how is gonna be his family after, what are they doing after when they go home, so all the time we're talking and taking notes. You never know, maybe come some idea later come after these two. So always we're saying this is like a work in progress project, which I'm really interested in, the idea of work in progress always, like for example, my fountains, which I'm working, is studies for the fountains. Even the fountain is finished, I'm still want to study about it and work in progress. So I think this idea of work in progress in general in life for me is really something very interesting.
I'm interested in that and kind of in the research for you both, because I wanted to speak a little bit about the sort of like potentially different approaches to working and research. I think that there is kind of forever an assumption that writing is this solitary process, while the cinematographic process is more social or hands-on, but I'm imagining that it's far more complicated than that in practice. You both spoke a little bit about your research processes, but could you share just your preparation for the job? Do you have rituals? Do you have, in my mind, everything that I do is like it's written down just as a writer, but do you have customs like that going into a project, or particular to this project? Iris, I wanted to ask that first.
I was hoping to hear from Isla first, because I was curious as to whether it's that simple. Because in a way, for me, that distinction still lives in that preconception, because my preparation is quite social. It's built on a lot of meetings and information gathering that is very much about understanding this project, or any project, from the director's point of view. A lot of that material comes from them, and what our sort of impetus is comes from the director. And I feel like I'm more there to support them while also respecting the participants first and foremost. So I suppose for scripted work, it's much more on paper, where I'm expected to have a lot to show and a lot to present and a lot of ideas offhand, or beforehand, where in the documentary space, I tend to work in a way that is more spontaneous and more about discovery in the field. So in that way, it is very collaborative and active and more hands-on, as you say. So I don't know. I might think of something else to add to that, but that's what I think of at the moment.
Isla, do you want to briefly comment before we break?
Yeah, sure. I think for me it was a bit different because I was the executive producer on this movie too, and so I could collaborate in all the creativity part too. So, for example, with costume designer Negar Nemati, with our artistic department Louisa Shabazz. So we were all the time having a conversation coming and going. So let's talk about myself. I was there in all the department, a little bit talking, having conversation, and then as you said on the papers, it wasn't really on the papers. Even sometimes we're laughing about how we did it because it wasn't really all the things really on the paper. And I think that's how it sometimes. This is a surreal and abstract film, but because Matthew, he's a experimental filmmaker too. So I think all these things together made this happen, just not be in a very traditional way of writing or of making art or making custom design or all the things has like a spice of a different into it. If I can say correctly, it's spice of difference into it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to go ahead and take just a 5-minute break. Everyone can go I'm going to go get some tea. So we'll be back at 5:11. All right. Thank you very much. All right, whenever Iris and Isla are ready, we'll get back into it. Sweet. So I wanted to ask Iris, I'm very interested because we've been speaking really about like the mechanics and the aesthetics of documentary, but I'm also really interested in the kind of like unscripted, unpredictable elements that are going to come with that. Do you have a favorite memory from the shoot or even a favorite scene which maybe felt unexpected to you?
You know, there is one that stands out, which was the day that we're filming the gut ceremonies, which are traditionally ceremonies that are very hard to access by film and video crews. So we were sort of privileged to be able to enter into that, and there are rules around that, which we have to respect in terms of, you know, it means that you can't get the best angles, you can't step into the ceremony itself, etc. But we had filmed a whole day with this unfolding over the course of, I think, 10 hours. And at the end of it, we knew that there was a boat launch to bless the sea and to pay respects to it and to make offerings to the sea. We didn't know how that was going to unfold, but there's a procession that just of musicians that exited the good area and walked toward the shore, got on this boat. We just followed them, and what ended up what came of that was this sort of rapturous, sunlit, sunbeamed sort of moment that was just for those who made it onto that boat, which is the director and the sound person, and I think my camera assistant and I, was just the most unique experience. That it actually didn't make it into the film because it didn't fit that sequence, but it feels like this life-changing sort of moment that we will always sort of hold together. And so it was just something very vibrant and unexpected at the end of a very sort of drawn out day.
That's such a beautiful story. And also, I really like the kind of mutual, unexpected, impromptu musicians kind of crashing the scenes in both of your experiences.
Yeah.
I also really loved, I think, just the images of the last of the sea women, of the women holding metal tools just above the water surface. I think that really just strikes me whenever I think about it. And it also weirdly kind of reminds me of Isla's installation, The Beaks from 2015, which for folks on the broadcast, go check it out. But it featured refractions of water onto a wall of resin beaks, which are all holding knives. And I just found that linkage in my mind really fun, and all of these kind of like unexpected linkages cropping up. I also wanted to speak a bit about kind of the driving ideologies and themes of these films. Both The Last of the Sea Women and Universal Language are concerned to some degree with modernity and how culture, customs, and rituals are disseminated. How did you each approach that as a kind of rerouting of tradition or expectations? Isla, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, when I watched the movie, and I said to myself, that movie and the universal language, they have very similarity together too, in a way that they making the community important, community-based solidarity, friendship, you know. And when the young woman meet the older woman all the time, they said to them, "Auntie, you know, we have the same thing." Like Hemela, our very old friend, old, I mean, from long time ago, and she's in her 80s too. She's in the bus. She's in the bus, which I'm the bus driver. So I mean, those things for me was really similarity between the two movie together. And I really loved it because I think now it's very important in the world why we're living. Maybe I'm not answering exactly your question now, but I really wanted to add this because I think there is something about solidarity and community and friendship. All of these things they have more important message than sometimes politics or social media, or you know, for ourselves when we did this movie, it was really set up these things. And when I saw the movie, which Iris was the DOP on that one, I really felt the same thing, and it really warmed my heart in a way, because even with that hardcore job and everything, but all the people, they were kind of taking care of each other, and as in our movie, the children took care of each other, you know. So yeah, I'm sorry, I think I really didn't answer your question in a way, or it's kind of
I
similar.
think you very much did. I feel like community care is really like a grounding principle in both of these films. And also that is kind of a subversion of the way that traditional film has both been created and also the kind of stories that are being told. So no, I think you absolutely answered the question. Iris, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think just bringing to awareness this sort of powerful female energy that exists on Jeju Island is subversive, was impressive, was amazing to be part of and witness to. That it is centuries old, that it exists, and yeah, just this matriarchal society that is butted up against modernity, but doesn't seem to flinch at it either, right? Even from within the community where there are modern or young Henyo doing their thing in a very different way. They can coexist in this really interesting dynamic, and they can actually come together in a really beautiful way too, where the characters love and respect each other for the different ways that they came into this. And I think the way that the production was assembled too, it was, the filmmakers really wanted to form a female-led team, and that sort of interestingly was in conversation with the content that we were shooting too, and just that we could be in this environment where, not that there weren't any men on the crew, but like just that we can be in this environment where we were all just doing our thing, and it's not something we need to necessarily talk about. It can just be the norm, which it is for us, which it is for them, and we were feeding off of each other in that way, which was really beautiful.
And you really get that sense, because when I first watched the film, I thought, of course, kind of just the way that traditional film and traditional documentaries and kind of gendered expectations have taught us to look. When the younger Hanyo come and are kind of taking up the practice on TikTok, there is that moment where you wonder if they're going to be presented as kind of a threat to the older generation. And then you kind of just see this like coexistence and this admiration of the practice and the culture. And I feel like that is a real testament to the kind of community and collectivity that both of these stories really are incorporating. I also feel like there is a sense of preservation to both of these films, kind of explicitly in The Last of the Sea Women, but also in universal language. Preservation of language and lifestyle and environment that I think really seems to resonate with viewers. Was the idea of safeguarding culture kind of, it's a big ask, but on your mind when developing these projects? And do you consider that independently, even of these projects, to be a significant part of your practice? Isla, do you want to go ahead? Sorry, I'm trying to go back and forth, so I'm not picking on anyone.
You.
I would say really for me was like a safe garden culture for sure. It's like, people talking in Farsi out of nowhere in a very cold Winnipeg, somewhere in the world. Of course, it's the language is Farsi and French in this movie, is no English going on. I mean, for sure, when people watch it, they will say maybe that this is the language which was important to as a cultural thing, but really we didn't think about it. I think this movie, I'm gonna talk for myself, this movie for me was something really beyond all of this. I mean, it was when I'm thinking about it, that in life we having kind of like a very, very rigid parts to live in as countries, borders, a mindset, even families, institutions, and And when something fluid, as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, something fluid going on like water, or we as people, we want to really pass by all this rigidity and just come out of it. And this is, I think this is the nature of human beings. And whatever they put inside, I mean, they as ourselves put inside our mind. And at the end of the day, we're so, we're more tender, you know, we have more tenderness as human beings. And I think in this movie for us was not preserving a specific culture, specific language. All the time I'm saying this is not a really Canadian movie or Iranian movie. It's really something like mixed about the whole communities, the whole language, the whole countries, the whole beyond borders, the whole beyond rigidity and powers and combine walls, combine Berlin walls. And it's something more just, we want to just go beyond it and be as a water which fluid in the world and just say, this is how the life has to be. That was our message, I think. And I just hope that we had this connection with the audience from the movie.
Thank you. I feel like that's very salient also for kind of talking about borders and talking about fluidity, because that really is what the film is giving off. Thank you. I appreciate the correction. Iris, did you want to speak to that?
I think indirectly there's a safeguard on culture. It's not something I consciously think of necessarily, but more with this film and other films that I work on, just more honoring what those cultures are and sort of just channeling marginalized perspectives just by being with them, by bringing them to light. I do know that there's sort of traditional elements to some of the films, like Twice Colonized, where we're just bearing witness to a voice that we don't get to hear very much. And in other Indigenous subject films that I get to work on, there's the element of ceremony and that specificity amongst all of these cultures, and being mindful of that and having an image of that, I think, is what permeates through these pieces. Yeah, I'm not sure how to really answer the question, but I feel like it's there in a very indirect way. But yeah.
I think so too. And I think even to modify the question to say like that, you know, your practice is kind of largely centered around how to grant images to marginalized peoples, marginalized ideas even. How do you go about choosing your projects? I'm always interested for documentarians and DOPs. Do they often come to you? Are you involved in the inception of certain ideas?
For me, they often come to me, and I particularly have been focusing my decisions on some form of marginalization or some form of lesser known. So whether it's in the subject matter of directly of somebody that we're following or an idea that we're following, or the director themselves, or a way of storytelling that channels that, I think I'm always looking for that myself. And at the same time as I'm trying to have some variety in my life, where I can't always focus on a certain type of story, but I have the privilege of being able to work on a lot of things at one time. So it's very much about, those decisions are very much about a balance as well.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple more questions just before throwing it to the audience questions. So Isla, I think you were speaking about this, especially in the idea of collectivity and fluidity. I think my experience watching Universal Language, I felt kind of instantly moved by the way that it like playfully is integrating Farsi into kind of like Tim Hortons signage and bingo halls and those sorts of environments. But it also accompanies a kind of institutional rewriting of Canadian culture. I get the sense that I know the answer to this question, but were you ever nervous about the reception to the film in the process of either writing it or making it?
Mm-hmm. I don't think so that we were worried about it, but I understand your question. In a way, I think Canada is a place always to have to be defined, and has new codes and new images and new ways of thinking. It's not something that say, okay, this is Canada, let's just think about it how it is. So when you see Tim Horton in Farsi, I mean, in a way, it's very funny for sure, but in a way, you can say, okay, it's something new coming. Maybe that's just the code, to have to give it to this audience or people in general, even to ourselves. I mean, so it's something that we're gonna have this perspective of seeing new things and new images in the country, which now is Canada, that we're all living in. So yeah, we weren't really nervous, and in a way, so many Canadians and Iranians, after watching Universal Language, they told us, both of them, they said they really felt kind of like a feeling of nostalgic, which we loved it when they say that, because for us was something that we made it some part of Iran nostalgia and some part of Canada nostalgia, and when the people connected with that, we were really happy about it.
I think also kind of with that, given the subject of the panel, which we've talked about and we've also kind of danced around, which is, creatura and all things sort of strange and unconventional. For both of you, were there things that kind of, or I'll ask Isla first, were there things that had to be cut, let's say, from the script for being, too weird? I mean, like the version of Universal Language that we're left with, you get turkeys that get their own bus seats and Kleenex pharmacies. And there's a lot of bizarrities that we do get to see and we do get to sit with. But did you have any moments of being like, oh, this needs to be scrapped? Or, between the three writers, oh, this needs to go?
Yes,
And
yeah, yeah, it happened. We had so many incidents, not so many, but some scenes. Yeah, I mean, it was so beautiful that we filmed, and now it's a very beautiful scene too. But we thought it's on now in this movie, maybe it's unnecessary to put it. For sure, it has to be. It gonna find his own way and his own life. That image and that part later in other ways, and maybe like a short movie or like a trailer or whatever. But yeah, it was some weird parts that we thought, okay, maybe here it's enough. Let's stop here. And I want to add this. We were really lucky to work with Meta Films in Montreal as production company with Sylvain Corbet, which they were really open to uh, all the things that we were saying. He was really saying, yeah, let's do that. More turkeys, why not? More donkeys, more children, so everything we were talking that it was difficult to work with. And children, always I'm joking about, it was so sweet working with them, but all the other parts, he was really open. So I think that was very, very privileged for us to have all of our ideas and say, okay, we want to do this, do that, and we just did it. But as you said, yeah, there were some parts that we just stop it and put it aside for now.
And Iris, in a similar vein, how do you consolidate all of the footage that you're getting? Because I imagine it's like an incomprehensible amount of footage, even if it's, at times difficult to get or there are moments of barriers to access. Is that something that you yourself kind of have to parse through before it's meeting the director and editor and those sorts of things?
Do you mean after we shoot? After
Yes.
the material is shot? Normally after anything is recorded on my camera, that card leaves me, it goes to somebody else who downloads it, and I never see it until the color grade. And so those surprises of how a film comes together and what remains and what no longer does is always a surprise to me. So there are a lot of scenes in this film that took a lot to achieve, to capture, that are not in, and a lot that I wasn't there for as well. That's really surprising. So the underwater footage, for instance, was not something I was on set for. It was a separate shoot. So it's a different skill set too. I'm not somebody, actually, I'm quite afraid of water. So when I came on board this project, I was very honest about that. I'm not a boat person. I get seasick, but I'll figure it out somehow. So they're like, okay. So we each had our specialties, and seeing that come together and seeing other people's work sort of alongside yours is always a really interesting process too, especially when you get to celebrate a film as a whole, before you get to meet all the people behind it whose work is intertwined with yours. It's I don't know, that's always a nice bonus to this, but I don't have the task of going through it myself, luckily.
Thank you both for sharing. I'm going to turn to some audience questions. Thank you for answering all of my questions.
That's a great question.
Thank you. The first question is for Iris. It's what's your approach with interacting with the subjects of the films you've worked on? Do you interact with them on a personal level or keep a bit of distance? What lessons did you learn from the women in the last? Oh, this is multiple questions. Let's go with the first one.
Okay.
Do you interact with them on a personal level or keep a bit of distance?
Generally, I do interact with them, and I try to be more personal than the director. I think we have different. I think sometimes I think of myself as someone who can alleviate a little bit of the pressure. Directors need to do this, but they need to be obsessed with the content and with the dynamic between their participants, and to ensure that we leave with something useful. I imagine that can get intense at times. And so I think I like to interact with the participants more as a friend or just someone on another side of a conversation. I like to put the camera down and not always look through it when I'm interacting with them. So I try to be a human presence. And sometimes I, as an extension of that, depending on the situation, I might keep in touch with them. And but always there is a little bit more distance than the director has with them. So there's this, there's a very temporary sort of intimacy or friendship, which I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it takes on different shapes, I think, and it's multifaceted, and I'm very much, that is something that occupies my mind a lot when I am working on a project, is how I am interacting with the people in front of the lens and how they're reacting to me, and whether that's useful to the film and to the director too.
And relatedly to that, the next question is, what lessons did you learn? What lessons did you learn from the women in The Last of the Sea Women that you brought into your own life?
There was a historian who, first of all, just aging gracefully, or just not, being so self-conscious, and just existing, I think is a really beautiful thing that they exemplify. That's an assumption of mine, of course, but there was something that one of the historians mentioned, which was that you can never be preoccupied. It's dangerous to think of your heyday. And I think that's really poignant and something I've taken to my life too. You're always a changing person. Your life is always evolving. And it's dangerous to always try to get back to something that you might not be able to achieve anymore. And to not embrace the present and what you're able to do in this moment is, it's dangerous because it might force you to do something that, I think in their situation, it's dangerous to hold your breath for as long as you used to, right? And to keep harvesting, and that might lead to death. I think that's what the anecdote was about. And I think for me and for us, and for anybody in this profession, we just have to have a little bit of perspective when we're dealing with the ways that our bodies and our minds change over time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. The next question is for both of you. It's what's everyone working on now? Would love to hear if Isla is working on any new film projects or installations.
Can I answer first?
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, for now, we were a little bit busy with film festival, which is fun too when going around, but we have other projects. For example, me and Matthew started another movie, as you said at the beginning, about Esperanto language. and it's a docufiction, but we couldn't finish because then we worked on this movie, so that's a little bit on pause, and later we're gonna, hopefully in spring, we're gonna go and continue that movie. It's a very, very interesting movie because Esperantists, they have Congress every year around the world, and that's kind of like a utopian idea, which unfortunately it didn't work out, And we were filming this. We filmed that, and we're working on that movie. And yeah, personally, I'm working on other installation, like another project, which the name of the project is Body Fountain, and it's more about installing the fountain on a person, on someone. It's not about the fountain as an object. This time, me as a person, I become I have the wearable fountain, and it's really connected between my whole body and my mind, and the circulation between the tubes and the water and coming out. So it's, yeah, that's a work in progress too. So I have to have time to work on that, and hopefully I can finish it till next year.
Those projects both sound amazing. Iris, did you want to share your upcoming work?
There's one interesting project that I can't talk too specifically about, but just that it deals with a very commonplace, ubiquitous subject that we all deal with now. But it's with a director that I've worked with several times, and because we've worked together and learned at every juncture, we're trying to do things a little bit differently, where we're trying not to subject people to sharing their lives on camera, but maybe finding another way to disseminate this information and the facts without, not the exploitation, but without the having to subject somebody to using their identity, I suppose. So it has to do with toxic beauty standards, but how do we talk about that in a different way? And I'm really excited to think about how we can unpack or just find different ways of the documentary form, because I think it's formulaic for a reason, but is there a way to get away from that formula where we're not just listening to someone talk and seeing images that go with it, and just stretching it a little bit, and also interrogating the way that we've been making films up until this point. Sorry to be vague.
No, I feel like that was like it's a bit enigmatic. It's nice. I'm like really excited now to see all of these projects develop. There is a third question for Isla. Was it daunting working as a screenwriter for the first time?
I would say yes and no, because I think the how I say in English, the ambience which I was coming from with Matthew and Pius, it was very friendly. So the way that, it wasn't the people that I didn't know, so I would become nervous about it, and it wasn't just about sitting and writing, as I told you. It was something that organically happened about during conversations and everything. So in a way, that way I was very comfortable with. But yeah, for sure, it was other responsibilities even in writing, being executive producer, and for the first time doing all these things, working with children, coach the children, even involved with the casting. So yeah, in a way, what for me was a little bit challenging, but I really learned a lot. So I'm really grateful about this experience, because now that I'm sitting here and talking with you and Iris, still I learned a lot from this 1 hour talk too. But imagine on this movie for 1 year, 2 years, and then filming, post-production, even now showing it everywhere in the world, is a process of learning, and I really appreciate it. So yes, I would say in a way was a little bit scary, but it was so many other beautiful things that come into it that I would say no, it wasn't scary neither.
Thank you for sharing that. That's all of our questions for now. A huge thank you to you both for sharing. You were so generous with your time and your answers. And it was such a pleasure getting to chat with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Thank you. Very nice to meet you, actually.
Thank you, Saffron.
That was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Saffron, for directing today's discussion. Thank you so much to Iris and Ela. You're both incredibly talented, and I think the audience can learn a lot. I learned a lot during this conversation, and we can't wait for folks who missed it to catch it on our YouTube anytime. And yeah, our festival goes on until November 23rd. We still have some upcoming events. Today, if you're in Toronto, we have an event called Music to Draw To, where you can come, you can draw, work on your screenplay, perhaps, work on some work while you listen to music, and we'll have tea set out. We close the festival with our short film pitch competition called So You Think You Can Pitch. We would love for folks to join. It's great for filmmakers or anyone that's interested in short films. Once again, thank you so much to Iris, Saffron, and Ela. Look forward to their future work, and please do watch their films if you haven't yet. They're incredibly beautiful, and we will catch you hopefully at our closing night event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
So much.